On the 25th of July 2020, I watched a fascinating documentary on the Mary Rose, or rather on her crew. Apparently, the remains of about 170 men, including about 90 near-complete skeletons, were recovered from the wreck. The skeletons are beautifully preserved, so it is possible to perform forensic and genetic analysis on them, and this was the subject of the documentary. There was some evidence already that some members of the crew were not English. Out of 8 skeletons, 1, a carpenter, had Spanish coins and a Spanish-style adze. Another had Italian personal effects. A third, a longbowman, and one of Henry VIII's guard, had a pomegranate symbol on some of his equipment. The pomegranate was at the time a Spanish symbol. Finally, another member of the crew had a skull that suggested African origins. The skeletons were tested for certain elements to see what kind of landscape was associated with where they lived, and oxygen tests determined latitudes. The more oxygen, the further south. Of the 8 skeletons, 4 were evidently from southern England. Of the 4 that I mentioned in more detail, 3 seem to have come from the Mediterranean. The carpenter could well have been Spanish, the possible Italian, and the longbowman could have been Spanish or even from North Africa. The longbowman was a little strange. His geography test gave typical England-Wales, but his oxygen test gave the Mediterranean. The African gave results from England, so genetic testing was conducted, and revealed Berber or Tuareg ancestry. He might have been a mixed parentage, or maybe he was a second-generation African, for example. I should note at this juncture that the documentary had an agenda. One of the academics had a motive to portray Tudor England as more mixed than commonly understood. The team went to great lengths to see if the African was African, but did not go to the same lengths to resolve the confusion with the longbowman. I am sure that people will point to this and take it as proof that Tudor England was ethnically diverse. I consider this a threat to the British because it denies the Anglo-Saxon and Celtic-derived Britons their unique claim to the land as their home. If they cannot claim it as theirs, then that undermines their right to protect it as theirs, and to protect themselves as a majority within it, leading to minority status and the risk of genocide in future. Therefore, I will suggest some stock responses upon which to call in your hour of need. On the subject of the mixed crew, you can concede that it is very surprising that up to 50% of the Navy was at that time non-English, but it is not surprising that it was less than 100%. If you have foreign ships docking in your ports, you will have contact with their foreign crews, and a population of foreign and mixed people in the port area. There are bound to be Italian ships with English crewmen, French ships with Irish crewmen, Spanish ships with Greek crewmen. The demographics of ships' crews do not represent the demographics of the countries, any more than the demographics of guests staying at airport hotels represent the demographics of those countries. On the issue of the mixed crew representing a mixed England, this can be dismissed. For one thing, the diversity is the product of foreign ships arriving in ports, so there is no reason to suppose that it extended far inland. People generally did not travel far in those days, and people associated with ships would not stray far from the sea if they wanted to find a job. Inland, there were probably some foreigners too in Tudor times. Foreign academics would have been in universities, foreign clergy in church properties, and foreign traders in marketplaces. However, such people would have naturally concentrated in larger settlements, where the universities, wealthier churchmen, and larger markets would have been. Like with the port, such foreign populations would have been very localized. Most of the population of England was rural at the time, so most of the population would have been homogeneous. Think of a school. The teacher-people ratio might be 1 to 30. But if I examine just the staff room, I will find only adults. Is the whole school adult? The Mary Rose was a ship in a port. It need not represent all of England. For another thing, the hard data from later censuses are available. The ethnic diversity of Tudor England cannot have been greater than the ethnic diversity of, say, Edwardian England, when travel was easier. Therefore, if people try to use the Mary Rose as proof that England has always been wildly ethnically diverse, you can reject the assertion, even in the face of the Mary Rose.